Alrighty, how's it going, everybody? I was trying to think of what video I could talk about. I was trying to figure out what I can talk about. Um, so I said, you know what? I know what I can talk about. And maybe some people know this and some people don't. But for those that are new to the channel, of course, my name is Mark. And of course, I call the channel Mark's Music Place. And I might change it. We've been having some serious weather, so this has been a winter this winter. You know, I know we're talking about the climate change and all that, but it's been a winter this winter. So, with that being said, of course, with that being all said, of course, hit the bell. If you haven't subscribed, please subscribe and hit the bell. And that way it'll let you know when I'm going to post videos. Definitely write some comments and, of course, give me a thumbs up. All of it helps the channel. And so what I wanted to talk about is basically what are commercial studios doing to get the sound that they're getting compared to what you may or may not be doing in your home recording studio. So really, if you look at it, commercial studios, what a really good commercial studio and the layout, meaning we're not talking about the basic things that this commercial studio is going to have. Typically a reception area, bathrooms, maybe a kitchen area, a lounge area, and things like that. But we're talking about the two main rooms. The tracking room, which is the live room, and we're going to talk about the control room, which where the engineer and all the gear is at. So I used to sit there, even though I used to go to, it never dawned on me to really, I just was that type of person when I used to go to the studios. I never really gave it a thought to the science of a live room and a control room. The audio science. It never dawned on me. I guess in this music business or in the audio world or whatever, you don't know what you don't know. Or you cannot know what you don't know. Or it's another way. It's impossible to know what you don't know. So, as I used to start studying, I used to really start analyzing recording studios within the last 10 years. For the most part. I really would really pay attention, especially when there would be recording or just, you know, people that go around doing studio tours, and why would they always talk about certain things in a recording studio? I was like, why do they all, you know, does that really matter? And believe it or not, it absolutely matters. And it's going to matter based on the genre of music that you do, especially. If you're a type of person that's doing a lot of analog recording, meaning acoustic guitars, electric guitars, drums, real good drums, bass, vocals, real horns, and all that, a lot of what a professional commercial studio does and how they're set up and how they're built and everything else helps. If you can really get the science down of what they're doing in a commercial studio, you can try to utilize your home to the best of its advantage for that very reason. But if you are doing more EDM, electronic, virtual instruments, synthesizers type of music, and you're just going to use a lot of just the built-in drum machines, virtual instruments, and you're just going to record directly into software, your DAW, then a lot of the stuff that how commercial studio is made is not even important. The rooms and the way commercial studios are important for only for acoustical analog recording. Period. It is not important for digital. So with that being said, if you are more digital concentrated, you can actually stop the video because, well, unless you want to continue to listen. Because it's all direct input. It's just a matter of what you want to do on the digital side is just mainly knowing how to properly use the tools like compressors, whether you're going to use plugins or gear, or you're going to use, how to mix and how to get a good recording and things like that, and how to properly balance EQ, how to properly use your DAW, how to use your editing tools, things like that. That all can be done internally within the computer for the most part. But if you are going to be doing a lot of live analog acoustical playing and recording, you have to ask yourself, what are the recording studios doing? What are they doing? And I'll narrow it down to this. Here's a few things that, if you understand this, you probably can get really much the same results if you do the same thing, if that makes sense. So, okay, let's analyze a live room. Okay, they have these tall ceilings, the angle, all these different, and they have these different types of panels, diffusers on the acoustical treatment, baffles, gobos. They have all this stuff in the live room. You have to say, well, if that's the case, then how do I overcome that in my home, my house, my apartment? The thing is, there are a lot of people that will give you videos on acoustically treating your room. But the issue might be that the room, no matter how much you acoustically treat it, it still might be too small of a room. Because there's other factors in the room that might be an issue, such as some rooms are too small because of the waves that are being restricted in the room. We call them standing waves. There's room nodes. Even if you can put acoustic treatment and panels and bass traps, the room might just be too small. The ceiling might be too low. So you might have, you're going to get a bigger sound with bigger space. That's just, now, that would bring me to another point, which would be that the recording studios, another advantage that a lot of these commercial studios have, and it's just their selection of microphones. A lot of times they record so much, they know which microphones are going to work in every type of scenario and situation. This comes with time, experience, ear training. Your ears are trained to know what microphone and how it's going to capture the source in the room and the room sound itself. So if you can understand the science in that, that's going to help you too. So now we're talking about acoustics, microphones, and the source and this space. Everything else is just going to be down to technical choices of gear. Now, there's a big controversy that, do we need a mixing console, or we can just go directly into an interface? Because the interface is basically, it's your digital, basically your signal converter, so the computer can trap it, understand the source. The old way, before computers and interfaces, it was tape machines. Tape machines was the old school DAW. People had to edit the tape. But now that you have a digital audio converter and going into a DAW, it's just the better choice the way to record, simply because of its audio and editing capability. It's miles ahead of tape. Some people argue that, well, I would rather use tape because of its tape saturated analog sound. Believe it or not, the audio difference between the tape and recording digital to your digital audio interface into your computer are not that drastically different anymore. Audio interfaces years ago just weren't, the converters weren't as good. Now the converters are a lot better. Sometimes we think the converters, a lot of times audio interfaces probably can be an overlooked commodity. But it's really amazing factor to what you're hearing is the audio interface, the converting, the signal conversion. So what else are the recording studios doing other than, well, the advantage is that when they run past signal through an analog console, as an example, the passing signal through an analog piece of gear is enough to really give it a nice sound, believe it or not, because it's just passing through some sort of circuit, crossing some sort of capacitor, resistor, transformer. All that can shape and really shape the sound. And that's going to be one of those key elements in case you were wondering that. Running it through a certain type of op amp and so forth. But other than that, most digital or most consoles in general pretty much are just their channels. They're basically so many channels of the same thing. That can be an advantage. It just depends on how you look at it. But the standard layout of any channel would be the same thing if you bought a rack preamp. If you bought a rack preamp and it was just a preamp itself, where you're only getting, like, for example, this console, there's 24 preamps in it. There's 24. So you're only getting, let's go back years ago, what they used to do to consoles. What they would do is they would take consoles and break them apart and turn it into its own individual piece of gear. They might want to use the preamp out of a Neve. And that's what they used to do. They would take the Neve 1073 preamp that came in a Neve console. They would take the preamp and then they would build a rack mount piece for just that. And people could buy that, and that became a popular thing to do. Same thing with just the EQ section. Same thing if it was a gate or whatever. That's what they would do. If you take away the preamp of any console, the EQ, all other than that, it's just basically what we call a summing mixer. Like this one has auxiliaries and faders, and then you can all these channels are inputs. And then there's this section of the console is the buses, and then there's the master. Well, the master is what you're hearing. Everything's going to the master, no matter what console it is. I don't care if it's an API, Neve, SSL, Heritage, Audient, Harrison, Trident, doesn't matter. All those consoles, every last one of the signal will end up coming out of the console through its master out. Unless you purposely reroute the signal to come out other outputs, such as auxiliary outputs or bus outputs. And sometimes people would do that, or even direct outputs coming out of each channel. But other than that, if you don't do any of that, it's going to come to the master output. The same thing in your DAW. You have your DAW, your mixer in your DAW gives you the same options. Most of the time, it'll allow you to send output directly out from the channel, directly to an output coming out of your audio interface, or you can reroute it to go to an auxiliary, and then it comes out, or you can reroute it to go to a bus group, and then that'll come out. You come out the bus group, out of the bus groups. Then it goes into the output. But other than that, they're all defaulted to come out the master fader. Just like every on this console, every channel's designed the route to come out the master output. So whatever your master output is capturing, that's what you're hearing. Now, what else advantages when it comes to the commercial studio? What else are they doing other than taking advantage of using their spaces, how the rooms are acoustically sounded, the microphone choices, and how the microphones are placed in front of whatever recording source they're going to record. Whether you're going to record guitar, a vocalist, a woodwind instrument, a saxophone, a flute, a trumpet, a trombone. They're going to record an organ or a piano. How the microphones are placed acoustic and taking advantage of the acoustic sounds of the room, and how the microphones are placed in the room to capture the source and the sound of the room. All that's going to go to the microphone preamp that they're going to choose. They might decide that they want to use the preamps on the console, or they can bypass those preamps on the console, and they might want to use a rack mount or an external preamp. Then, in the old ways, that preamp would then go through some additional pieces of equipment, such as compressors, gates, would go through, not reverbs, but EQs if needed. Then that would then go to the tape. They can monitor all signals going to the tape, and they would have a set of faders, separate set of faders to monitor that. Everything that's being recorded to the tape. Then they would have the tape machine. They're ready to go. They got every microphone and every instrument is ready. They got them exactly placed the way they want. They got whatever microphone preamps they're going to use, whatever pieces of outboard gear they're going to use. All that set up. Now they're ready to record. And they hit record and play, and starts recording. Boom. Same thing. If you set up in your DAW, you multi-tracking your DAW, everything's going to go through your AD to D converter, which means your audio interface. That's going to go on the hard drive on your computer or laptop. Same thing. Now, once they've done recording, stop. Now the recorded source is recorded. Now they're ready to do some mixing. And they're going to edit first. They're going to listen back and see if they need to edit. Do I need to cut, splice, whatever? I need to punch in again, fix this part, fix that part. Then after they get all the editing, they're ready to mix. So now all the outputs coming out of the tape machine are coming back to the console. And that's going to go, it's not going to come, usually don't go back into the microphone preamps in the console. Because you don't need the microphone preamps anymore, because you're just listening to a line recorded signal from the tape. So that's going to go into, but it might go back to, they might use the same channel, but they're actually going through the, for some consoles have small faders for monitoring and go to tape, and then big faders for mixing. And so now they're going to listen again. They're going to start adding EQs and say, okay, now I'm ready to start adding gear. I need to add compressor on channel 1 for kick or whatever. I need to add EQ. I need to add this. I need to add that. And they're going to decide what pieces of gear they want to add on every single channel. And all those channels are going to be now grouped to go to certain bus channels. And then after those boost channels, they're going to add whatever gear they're going to add on the bus channels. They're going to add inserts of gear, compressors, EQs, whatever. They're also going to set up auxiliary channels so they can parallel reverbs and delays along with the original source on separate channels. they'll do that. And then once they get done, all that's going to be routed to the master main mix master. And that, in the old way, it would go to a 2-inch or a half-inch, 2-track half-inch tape for the master. That's the master. But in the DAW world, once it comes out of the master output, that's going to come out of the master output back into your interface, but that's going to come on its own separate input channels and record your own 2-track stereo master into your software on a separate set of master channel that you set up in your DAW, right? And of course, you know, once you do the same thing, you get your recording source except if you're going to use outboard gear and inserts of using the console, you got loads of outboard gear. Or if you're going to record into your DAW, you're just going to use strictly a lot of plugins and use the plugins in the box, or you use a combination of both, because you can actually route your outputs to come out of your interface into your channels of your console. You might want to use the plugins and you might want to use outboard gear. You can do it that way too. But if you got a lot of outboard gear, it's always recommended to have a patch bay, so you can just patch in the gears. It's easier to do that way instead of always running behind and, you know, always trying to plug stuff in the back. That's the whole purpose of the patch bay, is basically visualizing the back of all your gear. So other than that, other than a few things that the commercial studio might do, such as the acoustics of the control room, how their studio monitors are, they might be, for example, the studio monitors might be what we call, I'm drawing a blank, basically calibrated to the room. So you're going to set the calibration of the room. Like, for example, these truths on the back there, and the truths have selectors on the back to reduce or certain low end or high end frequencies, so you're not getting these really excessive low end signals bouncing off the in the room. So you're going to adjust your speakers. Of course, they would do this. The speakers will be adjusted so they can definitely hear exactly. So the reference of the speakers are going to be accurate to the control room. What else are they doing? That's pretty much it. Other than the only other thing that I can say with a commercial studio compared to what you're doing at home is, if you're not familiar with gear, example, if you're not familiar with compressors or EQs or the settings in a reverb or the settings in a delay, if you're not familiar how EQ works and things like that, that's really the only other difference that these commercial studios are doing that you may not be doing. So I'm going to end the video. Okay. So to summarize the video, other than the commercial studio having a large console as one of their options and having choices of outboard gear as their option, the only thing that really they're going to have, the rooms are usually not only are they properly wired, they're properly grounded. It's like with this console right now, you can't hear, but I got these channels maxed, and you can't even hear the speakers. You can't hear them. That's the key. Those are one of the key things. Properly wired. The speakers are properly placed. The speakers are calibrated. Like these speakers in here are calibrated. That's why they're pretty accurate in here. The acoustics I got lucky because it technically, with this being a box room, it's not supposed to acoustically work in here, but it does. What else the commercial studio has other than their live room, how everything's wired, their mic lines, their tie lines, the acoustic panels, the diffusers. Other than what they're doing as far as placing the microphones in the recording studio and properly placing the microphones on drum kits, pianos, guitar cabinets, acoustic guitars, horns, string instruments, microphone placement. Other than that, everything else becomes down to choice of using, am I going to use the microphone preamps on the console or am I going to use external preamps? Am I going to record to a tape machine or am I going to record into a DAW? And what signal chains of gear am I going to use per microphone for whatever source? Am I going to use this compressor, this microphone with this mic preamp and this compressor, and that's going to record to tape or into my DAW? Or am I going to use this microphone with this microphone preamp and this compressor and EQ, and that's going to be mine? That's the only. Other than that, am I going to use the microphone preamp and the EQ on the console? Or am I going to use external? Or am I going to use other gears? That's what they're doing. Once they get everything recorded, they're going to monitor through their set of faders on the console to monitor what's going on, and they can listen to it as they're recording. This is why monitoring through a console is why it's the best option for zero latency, because you're hearing everything immediately instead of trying to send it directly into your audio interface, and then you have to hit the monitor to hear. A lot of times you get a little bit of a delay because it has to go through all that, the interface, it has to process all that, and then send the signal back out, and you're hearing the after. And that's why it sounds like a little bit delayed. If I talk, it's a little bit of delay, and that's the reason why. That's why I like using the console. I get zero latency, and that's why they do that. So, with that being said, other than that, once they get everything recorded, now it's to play back, do some editing. They do some editing. Then after that, it's ready to mix it. Now they're going to decide what plugins, what pieces of gear, and they're going to process it, and they're going to put everything, whatever they're going to insert on each channel, set up bus channels, whatever piece of gear going on the buses, channels, plugins, pieces of gear. All that's going to go to a master output, which is usually the old school would go to a 2.5-inch 2-track master. In this case, you run an output going to a 2-channel master track to record back to your audio interface, and you record that 2-track master from your master bus back to your interface on 2 separate master, your master track. Same thing. And if you do all that, if you know what's going on, you'll get the same results. So other than that, that's going to do it for this video. Thanks for watching. Y'all have a great one.